Strong earnings continue to drive Wall Street higher. The S&P 500 hits record highs, while the Dow and Nasdaq indices also close in the green. European markets also closed largely higher, while Asian markets trade mixed this morning. Telecom sector in focus. Bharti Airtel reports a revenue beat led by better than expected India mobile performance and a strong quarter from the Africa business, even as profits dropped 62% on a sequential basis. India's biggest lender, SBI, will report its first quarter numbers today. Net interest income is expected to be weak, while asset quality is likely to remain stable, led by healthy recoveries and upgrades. And D Street diagnosed with IPO fever. 4 companies' public issues set to open for subscription today, with a planned fundraising of over 3,600 crore rupees on the table. India's effective reproductive rate of the COVID-19 virus has crossed the major threshold of 1 across 8 states, says the union government, calls it a significant problem and warns that the second wave is still raging. All right, those are the top headlines that we are tracking this Wednesday morning. We will discuss them, of course, in greater details. But first up, let's start with the Asian markets. We are seeing mixed cues as far as the Asian markets are concerned. Nikkei is down 27 points, Hang Seng down 108, Shanghai just at the flat line with some positive bias. Remember, the cues from US and European markets have been quite strong, and that's why just 2 indices in the Asian markets are not doing well. But other than that, we are seeing green across the Asian screen. But let's also bring up SGX Nifty for you. Well, that is indicating that the start for our own markets could be well in the green, and that is indicating an uptick of 50 points. So after continuous buying that we saw yesterday, there could be some more buying today as well after the record high levels that we saw on Nifty yesterday. But let's talk about the US markets. Wall Street finishes in the green, with the S&P 500 hitting fresh life highs, while the Dow added 278 points and the Nasdaq was higher by 80 points. CNBC's Bertha Coombs gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
Stocks finishing in the green on Wall Street. The Dow adding 278 points, the S&P up nearly 36, and the Nasdaq higher by 80. Household debt jumping by the most in 14 years in the second quarter to nearly $15 trillion here in the U.S., that according to the Federal Reserve. That's thanks mostly to a surge in the housing market, but the swell in debt wasn't just about mortgages. Credit card balances increased by $17 billion, while auto loans increased by $33 billion. Under Armour shares getting a big boost after the athletic gear maker reported second quarter earnings and sales that topped expectations, and then it raised its revenue outlook. Sales in North America, the company's largest region, rose over 100% year over year, while international revenue also doubled. Clorox, meantime, falling 8% after profits in its latest quarter came up short of expectations. The household products maker's sales dropping from a year ago when consumers were stocking up on its cleaning and disinfecting products during the height of the pandemic. You're up to date on the action here stateside. Now back to you in Mumbai.
All right, that's the action from the Wall Street, but CNBC's All America Economic Survey shows that 51% of Americans remain pessimistic of the current state of the U.S. economy and the outlook for the future, the highest since 2015. The pandemic and inflation top the list of concerns. CNBC's Steve Lisman gets us a quick roundup of all the findings of that survey. Steve?
The rise in the Delta variant of the virus and surging inflation, they look to have caused Americans' views on the economy to fall sharply. That's according to the latest CNBC All-America Economic Survey. 51% of the public say they're pessimistic about the current state of the economy and about the outlook. That's the most pessimistic they've been since 2015. Just 22% give the economy positive marks. Views now worse than they were in the teeth of the pandemic in the spring. Republicans have turned sharply negative on the economy, much more so than they were in April. But independents have also grown more pessimistic, and to a lesser degree, so have Democrats by 3 or 4 points there. Both the virus and inflation, top areas of concern for the public. And some 86% say they've taken at least one step to combat the rise in prices. The most frequent means you can see there: reduced spending on discretionary items like eating out. But respondents also said they were driving less, traveling less, and saving less money. A bright spot, 59% of the public say, hey, They think they can find another job in the area where they live at similar or better pay, a sign of the tight job market out there. The confidence was evident across racial, income, and age groups, but it was really strong among 18 to 34-year-olds or your young adults out there. But the overall pessimistic tone, it crept into views on the stock market. Just 33% think now is a good time to invest in stocks. That's the lowest since 2016, and again, lower than it was during the worst of the pandemic. Increased pessimism on stocks is broad-based, and it includes the wealthiest Americans and those with the most in the stock market. Question now, whether this pessimism translates into less spending by Americans, many of whom, because of all the assistance out there, are flush with cash at the moment.
All right, that's the global market action, but how will these overnight cues impact our own markets? Well, we have our research team joining in to tell us what the trade set looks like, the stocks that are likely to be in the news, and the action from the F&O space as well. Hi guys, a very good morning. So now let me come across to you first. Record highs for our own markets yesterday. Do you think this trend will continue today? What is the market setup we are watching out for?
Well, looks like the party will continue, Sonal. So the SGX Nifty is up almost 50 points. Remember, the Sensex Nifty and the mid-cap index hit a record high yesterday, so there's no stopping the bulls. The best part is that after many days of selling, foreign investors are back to buying in the Indian markets. So yesterday, FIs bought 2,117 crores. This is the first buy figure that we've seen from FIs since the 13th of July. Also, FIs have bought 7,418 crores in the F&O market. However, domestic institutions have sold, but not a large amount, about 300 crores or so. So the momentum is pretty much intact. Now, the big cue to watch today is we have 4 big IPOs that opened today. There's Devyani International, Windblast Bio, Krishna Diagnostics, and Exaro Tiles. So a lot of action in the primary market. The very strong global cues as well. The US markets hit record highs. The Dow was up almost 300 points yesterday. The S&P 500 hit a record high as well. Earnings season has kicked off on a positive note. In the US, you had makers like Lyft and Caesar Entertainment reporting better than expected numbers. And for our own markets as well, you know, stocks like Titan, SBI have been rallying ahead of their earnings. So definitely this market is in buy mode, and the SGX Nifty indicating the same. Back to you.
Okay, so good performance expected today as well. By the way, SGX Nifty has spiked. It was up around 40 odd points when we started the show, and it is up around 73 as we speak. So that's something that we'll be watching out for. Look at that, it is at the day's high. But let's go across to Nupur now, who will list out the stocks to watch out for in today's trading session. Nupur?
Well, Sonal, as we are in the middle of Q1 earnings, so let me begin with from that space. Bharti Airtel reported revenues better than street expectations, driven by both India as well as Africa business. On sequential basis, revenues up 4% and margins as well inched higher during first quarter. So keep an eye on that stock. Tata Consumer Products, where company reports largely in line set of Q1 earnings, revenues up 11%, but strong recovery witnessed in both gross as well as operating margins on sequential basis. So that stock will also be in focus. Kadaro Power Transmission, where we saw strong Q1 numbers, revenues up 38%, operating profits also up 10%, but margins lagged behind, fell to 9.6%. Adani Enterprises as well reported very strong Q1 earnings, but it's coming on a low base. But operating efficiency helped improve their margins during their first quarter. Keep an eye on SBI, Titan, Apollo Tyres, Bosch, HPCL, Godrej Consumer Products to come up with their Q1 earnings today. From news flows, keep an eye on Dr. Reddy's as company launches OTC drug in the US. Actually relaunches this drug. The market size of this particular drug is $316 million. So watch out for that stock. And lastly, Balaji Amines, where company announces setting up of a new plant where the capex will be around 70 to 80 crores.
Okay, all right, Nupur, thank you so much for those details. And finally, Agam is joining in with the cues from the F&O space this morning. Agam?
Well, a lot of things have changed dramatically yesterday, considering we saw a sharp surge as well as the Nifty moving into the new uncharted territory, which is why the Nifty open interest has seen a near 11% increase in open interest towards fresh longs. We've also seen a lot of unwinding as far as the Nifty banking futures go. In fact, that's where the open interest has declined by as much as 16.5%. FIs have clearly changed their stance, and this time they have added nearly 19,000 contracts towards the long side index futures and also unwound nearly 12,000 contracts from the short side. Moving on to options, firstly, I want to make a mention of the put call ratio, which has now edged up substantially to around 1.64 versus 1.25 day before, and the 200-point range has now moved above the mark of 16,000. So now we're looking at around 16,000 on the lower end, where we've seen a lot of writing in the puts. In fact, we've seen about 1.2 lakh contracts written there, and on the higher end, not as much for the 16,200 call, where we've seen some amount of writing. And finally, coming down to stocks, Cummins India, Ashok Leyland and Lal Path Labs looking at some fresh longs, but it'll all be about the index today.
Okay, it'll all be about the index today. Agam, Nupur and Sonia, thank you so much for joining and prepping us up for this important trading day ahead. With that, we'll slip into our first short break. Up next, big earnings action on the D Street today. We take a look at Bharti Airtel's numbers that were reported yesterday, while also previewing SBI's first quarter numbers due later today.